You're watching Top 10's Net, and in the video today we're looking at the top 10 glorious facts about the Vikings.
Welcome back everyone, History with Hilbert here, joining you again for another video on my channel. This time I'll be reviewing the top 10 glorious facts about the Vikings.
Traders.
The Viking Age is commonly believed to have started in 793 AD when the Lindisfarne Monastery, which is off the coast of Northumberland in northeastern England, was attacked. The invaders were most likely Vikings from Norway. However, one researcher argues that the Viking
Very accurate Viking ship there, just to point it out, you know.
Age actually started earlier when the Vikings sailed from Norway to a trading post on Denmark's coast 70 years before their raid on Lindisfarne.
The Vikings came from Denmark as well. You know, they weren't just Norwegian. So the Danish were actually also prone to going Viking, not just the Norwegians.
After making contact with the Danes, the Vikings didn't raid them.
If the Vikings did not raid them, then they are by definition not Vikings. The term Viking means to go out over the sea and go raiding. What you're describing is trading. Going somewhere with goods, leaving with other goods or with money because you have given your goods or bartered them is called trading, not being a Viking.
Trading route. Evidence to back up the trade route theory are combs made from reindeer antlers that were found in Denmark. Carbon dating determined the bones were from an animal that lived around 720 AD.
Okay, 720 BC is almost a century before the Viking Age, and it's pretty obvious that Scandinavians have been trading with each other long before the Viking Age, as well as with the Frisians, who had mercantile centres in Scandinavian towns such as Kaupang. So this really isn't new revolutionary evidence. This is just pre-Viking Age Scandinavia. You know, it's nothing new.
At the time, reindeers weren't found in Denmark. They were only found in Norway, and the Vikings were known to use reindeer antlers in their day-to-day lives. These findings also debunk the notion that the Vikings were simply raiders that took what they wanted, because they were also skilled traders.
No, it doesn't, because as I said earlier, Vikings by definition are raiders who take what they want. The evidence is also from a century before the first Viking raids, so it doesn't really hold up.
Also, these decades of trading gave them training that made them better sea travelers, which led to their explorations and raids.
Number 9. Women Vikings travelled with the men.
For many years, it was believed that when the Vikings came to a new land, they just took what they wanted. This included
which by definition they did.
Women. This led many to believe that when the Vikings set up a new settlement, they would just bring in local women. That changed in 2014 when DNA evidence seemed to suggest that the Vikings would travel with women from their home country to places as far-flung as Canada and Russia. There is also evidence to suggest that they came along on journeys to help colonize the areas. In fact, it is thanks to the women Vikings that a place like Iceland was colonized, because the island was uninhabited before the Vikings got there.
Okay, that's doubly false. Firstly, there's evidence of pre-Norse inhabitants on Iceland. Both the Landnámabók and Íslendingabók describe the presence of Irish monks, whom they named Papar, living on the island prior to the Norse discovery and later settlement on Iceland. Furthermore, there's been excavations of cabin ruins in Hafnir, which have revealed that they were inhabited from 770 to 880 AD by means of carbon dating. This is before the Norse started to settle on the island. Secondly, the Norse on Iceland certainly did use captured women to populate the island, even more so than in other places. Though there were many Norse women among the initial original population, increasing DNA evidence has suggested that up to, and even some estimates even place this figure way higher, than half of all Icelandic women are of Celtic origin, as opposed to about a third of this figure for the men. So this suggests that Celtic women make up a very large proportion of the original Icelandic population, which is why so many Icelandic women have such a high amount of Celtic DNA in their blood.
Mead.
According to Viking folklore, the Norse god Odin gained his strength while drinking mead as a child.
Okay, this is a classical example of trying to draw a convenient conclusion without actually having read into the subject you're trying to draw it from. Odin is not famous for gaining his strength from mead, because he drank it as a child. The Norse were a very poetic people, and what this guy is referring to, or at least what I think he's trying to refer to here, is in fact the mead of poetry. Now, the legend goes that there was a very learned traveling man named Kvasir. Now, Kvasir wasn't an ordinary man, because Kvasir had in fact been created from the collected spittle from both the Asir and the Vanir, which basically, for the intents and purposes of this video, were two different branches of Norse gods. And they'd done this as a physical embodiment of a truce that had been agreed upon after a war between the Asir and the Vanir. Now, in fact, this Kvasir was on his travels, and he was in fact murdered by two dwarves, who poured his blood into 3 vats, which they mixed with honey to make a mead, which bestowed upon the drinker great poetic skills and made him a skald. Now, why this is relevant to the point I'm trying to make here is because Odin later steals these draughts when he is in the form of a bird, and he steals it from the giant Suttungr, who took it from the dwarves. Odin then gives this mead of poetry to the other gods, and also to the men who were gifted in poetry and in skaldic verse. Now, this myth is in the Poetic Edda, among plenty of other myths, which are really good to look into. And recently there's been a very well translated version, which has been translated from Old Norse into modern English by Professor Jackson Crawford from the University of California, Berkeley. I'll leave a link in the description so that you can find where you can have a look at this book, but I'd highly recommend that you do look into this and possibly even buy a copy, because it really is worth your while if you're interested in this period.
At least.
Number 2. They founded Dublin.
Actually, the Irish place name meaning Blackpool denotes that there was a pre-Norse settlement there. This pre-Norse settlement on the Liffey is also referenced by Ptolemy, who was a Greco-Roman scholar.
In a number of cases, the Vikings set up settlements on inhabited islands like Greenland, Iceland, Normandy, and Newfoundland, Canada. They also had settlements in kingdoms near places they raided, like in Great Britain. After the Vikings invaded Ireland in 795 AD,
the Vikings didn't actually invade Ireland in 795 AD, just as much as they didn't invade England in 793 AD. That was actually when they'd raided Rathlin Island, which is off the northern Irish coast, but that was it. The first Norse settlement in Ireland, which I guess you could class as an invasion of Ireland,
was in the first half of the 9th century. Alright guys, thank you ever so much for watching again. I hope you've enjoyed this little review video that I did of the top 10s video about the Vikings. I just thought I'd have to say something before anyone got the wrong idea about what's fact and what's fiction. So please join me again next time, where I'll be doing some more History with Hilbert on the channel. Please like, comment and subscribe, and recommend it to your friends if you enjoyed it. And don't forget to leave anything in the comments below that you might disagree with, or just anything in general, any suggestions for videos, anything like that, you know, just shoot me a message in the comments and I should reply to you before too long. Alright everyone, have a good night. History with Hilbert.